in mind is that all our fruit is for export, and us South Africans get the B or C grade of fruits. So I'm glad that we have quite an expert like yourself, just to maybe teach us about trade and marketing around fruits and get an in-depth understanding of what HoodGrow does. So maybe that's just my first question for this evening. If you could just maybe explain HoodGrow as an organization, what is it about, and what is its objective?
HoodGrow is the Grower Association for deciduous fruit growers. We are funded by growers through a statutory levy that's in place for 4 years. And after every 4 years, we do a vote again. And if there's a majority vote amongst the deciduous fruit growers, then the levy is instated again for a further 4 years. So governed by growers, funded by growers. And basically two main functions that we look after. The one side is HoodGrow Science, which focuses on research and development, and then tech transfer, which of course has a lot of legs underneath that. And then the other part is the trade and the markets that I'm responsible for. So looking after market access, market development, product standards, regulations, basically logistics these days as well. With the issues we have in the port. So pretty much anything and everything that's got to do with markets. Right. Just to add, so we don't trade ourselves. Okay. So our main goal is to try and create an enabling environment for our growers, exporters and packers to flourish in.
Right. So we'll get more into detail on that just in a sec. But for people who just don't understand the difference between an ordinary fruit and a deciduous fruit, just what are deciduous fruits? And I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Your pronunciation is correct. So deciduous fruit, the technical interpretation or term means fruit that leaves, or trees that loses their leaves in winter, compared to citrus trees which keeps their leaves throughout the year. So that's the broad term deciduous. And within our definition of deciduous, it refers to pome fruit, which is apples and pears. In the UK, they call it top fruit. And then the other big group, or smaller group, but the other grouping is stone fruit, which is apricots, peaches, nectarines, plums, and then cherries. So the ones with a rock hard center or the stone.
So you mentioned that HoodGrow came about within 4 years ago, or maybe you were in the organization 4 years ago, but it's a member-based organization. What was the landscape like before HoodGrow? So farmers that are farming apples, pears, all the crops that you mentioned just now, did they have to find their own markets? And is that what brought about the formation of HoodGrow?
HoodGrow has actually been around since effectively 97, 98. So the 4 year cycle is basically, we tell ourselves we've got a 4 year lifespan. And if we don't do our job, then the growers won't vote again for us and the levy to stay in place. So that's where the 4 years come in. But prior to 97, our industry, as many others, were regulated. So there was only one export in the country. All growers had to export through that one exporter. Then in 97, the industry deregulated, and you could basically pack and export through anybody you want to. So HoodGrow, in essence, came about just after deregulation and grew a lot in between and evolved as the times and the conditions evolved to where we are now.
All right. So just also to understand the structure, like you mentioned, it's a grower-led organization. So the farmers pay a certain fee yearly, and they employ experts like yourselves, that would work in the office, so to say, to work on behalf of the farmers' produce, while the farmers at the end of the day are still at their farms, etc. And then you just, working for the farmers, providing the markets, any, documentation that's required for trade, logistics, like you said. And then, yes, that is a 4 year cycle. Is that what you say?
Yes. So, yeah, the 4 year cycle that we vote on, or the growers vote on. So it's interesting. Our industry is very integrated. So you will find that growers or groups of growers own a pack house, like the old cooperative type of setup. Then this pack house will also do the marketing for them locally as well as abroad. So where we come in is at a higher level, where these groups of growers issues that they can't resolve themselves, and for instance, research that will benefit the whole industry. We do on behalf of all the growers, and government relations. You talk market access. It's a level that a grower or a couple of growers can't do on their own when you want to get access for a new product to a country like China, for instance.
Okay, great. So let's talk about your specific portfolio. You said you're involved in the trade and marketing side. What does that entail?
The one part is market development, where we don't like to use the word promotions because that's got a negative connotation at grower level and a cheap price. But we promote South Africa as a brand and South Africa as a supplier of fruits worldwide. So we've got market development campaigns running in the UK, in Germany, in the Middle East, Dubai, in China. We launched one this year, in India as well, and also locally. And in the overseas campaigns, it's about distinguishing South Africa as the preferred supplier, basically from the Southern Hemisphere. We supply mainly to the Northern Hemisphere when it's opposite seasons. So our main competition is from Chile, Argentina, Brazil, New Zealand, and Australia. So internationally, it's creating that platform and that brand, that preferred preference for South African fruit as the preferred supplier. And then on the local market, it's just about promoting consumption of our fruits and stone fruit specifically.
Yeah, and without talking too negative around the growers that you represent, is it true that with very niche crops like deciduous fruits that you've mentioned, stone fruits, is it true that farmers would put first preference to selling the A grade to international markets, and then the local South Africans will consume the B grade?
It's not entirely true. We produce too much fruit for the local market, so we have to export. Otherwise, the local market will be completely oversupplied. And to be brutally honest, your best prices is achieved on the export market. But the fruit that you consume on the local market comes from exactly the same tree. It's treated exactly the same as the export fruit. And in 99% of the instances, it's about the color of the fruit, or the size of the fruit, or if it's got a little rub mark where it rubs against a branch or another fruit. So that's basically what the difference is between export fruit and local fruit. In many instances, the problems comes in after the fruit has been picked and packed and delivered, and how it is treated from the pack house to the final consumer. Once fruit is picked, it has to be cooled and kept in the cold chain up till basically you and I eat it. Otherwise, from there, it just degenerates in terms of quality. So our what's correct word, bugbear, is how fruit is actually treated by the sellers on the local market and thrown around and not kept cool and so forth.
Right. At what point, Jacques, does a farmer then decide that it's time to export? Right, because I could be a new fruit farmer. Maybe I'm farming pears and I've invested in a huge pear farm wherever in South Africa. And at what point do I decide that a certain percentage of my production will go to local market and a certain percentage would go to export? But I want to focus more on the export. So at what point does a farmer decide it's time to export, and when do they need to have that decision made? So is it 2 years in advance? Is it 12 months in advance? Meaning signing those contracts and agreements with your export market, so that, because I can imagine with stone fruits and deciduous fruits, it takes quite some time. Does a farmer need to make that decision to say, with this percentage of crops that I'm going to harvest at the farm, X percentage is going to go to export market? And how does one need to prepare for that?
I'm going to distinguish a bit. I'm going to leave out the dried fruit and the fruit that is meant for processing and canning, because
Okay.
most of those growers they focus on that, and that's their focus. But if you talk for the fresh market, your question is when you start making those decisions. That's probably 5 years before you even plant the orchard. Um,
Wow.
I mean, it takes you, if you decide today, I want to plant apple or pear trees, you have to put your order in for trees today. It will take you probably 2 years at least to get those trees. Then you plant them. Then it takes another 3-4 years at least until they start bearing any fruit. And then probably another 3, 4, 5 years before it's in full production. So it's a long-term investment. It's a huge investment to farm with fruit. It's in excess of 400,000 rand per hectare to establish an apple orchard, for instance, at this stage. Just one hectare. So then you have to keep that tree alive. You have to feed it. You have to irrigate it. You have to prune it. You have to train it. And then you start getting your small little harvest in year 3, 4 maybe. So just trying to get to the extent of your capital as well as your operating capital that's needed before you start even thinking about breaking even.
Yeah.
So a tree's in the ground for minimum 25, 30 years. So it's a long-term planning that you have to do. And different markets have different preferences for fruit. For instance, Golden Delicious, which is one of our biggest apple cultivars, we mainly export to Africa. It's a green apple. If you want to export to, say, Taiwan, then it's mainly Fuji, which is a redder type apple. And coming back to the difference between local and export fruit, the East, if you generalize, they want the red fruit. And South Africans are happy to have fruit that just tastes good but doesn't have to be glossy red. Or if you take Pink Lady, which has got a pink blush on the side, the markets overseas want that pink blush, but exactly the same apple from the same tree, which doesn't have the blush, doesn't get nearly as close to that price as the pink one.
Wow. And with how we compared against the global markets, Jacques, I just want to find out maybe what are the top fruits that are in demand specifically from South Africa to the global audience, and what makes us so unique when it comes to growing the specific fruits that HoodGrow looks after.
Maybe let's start with that point. It's our unique climate, actually a harsh climate for growing fruit in. And also South Africa is a water scarce country. So our fruit, we believe, and it has been proven, as a better eating quality than many of the other fruits produced in other countries with abundance of water and so forth. But getting back to the different markets, it differs substantially between fruit types as well. If you take it back one step, for instance, we export between 45 to 50% of our total apple production. On apricots, we only export 4%. On plums, we export 75%. And if you start talking markets all over the world, let's say 70% of our stone fruit gets exported to the UK and Europe. If you take apples, almost 30% goes to Africa via ship, Western Africa, Nigeria, Eastern Africa, Kenya on that side. And then the other 30% goes to the East, whereas we almost send no stone fruit to the East at this stage. So each fruit kind unique in terms of preferences, in terms of consumers, markets, and specs.
Yeah, you mentioned about the high costs in farming the different fruits. 400,000 Rand minimum per hectare, and then you obviously need to look at operating costs, et cetera, before you break even. And you also mentioned the various different fruit specs and varieties that different countries would like to buy from South Africa. Do you ever have you found yourself as HoodGrow, as an association, in a position where there's a shortage of the right type of fruits based on the global markets? But because maybe, let's say, certain farmers have stopped farming, or do you find that, a pink apple farmer has now converted into a pear orchard? But do you ever find yourself in a case, or have you had instances where there's been a shortage of a specific fruit spec or variety simply because there was not enough production?
Not really. It's supply and demand. So the less fruit we have, technically, the higher the price should be. But we operate in a global market. So if South Africa's got a drought or issues with production, then the buyers will go to Chile or Argentina or Brazil or wherever they can get the fruit. So it's a very fluid, integrated global supply and demand system. Some years our fruit are a bit smaller, so then you struggle to supply the markets who prefer bigger fruit. Other years you've got some sunburn if there's heat waves, and then you have issues perfect, and you struggle to supply certain markets. But yeah, it's a very fluid and integrated system.
Yeah. So again, with your portfolio, it's all about trade and markets as well. And when you talk about export markets, everybody talks about exporting in a positive way, to say, yes, export definitely, because you get the highest price, you get your crop to be eaten by someone in London or in China or whatever the case is, which could bring a very good story for your farm. But what are some of the downsides of exporting that people are not really aware of? Is it long-term payments? The documentation? I mean, we've heard of the African Free Trade Agreement. Has that really opened up the industry more? So maybe just give us some idea in terms of the cons or the downsides of exporting and what people don't usually think of.
It's a high risk business. As I said earlier, it's where you earn the most money. So you want to pack as many fruit for the export market as possible. The downsides is all the accreditations and all the minimum specs and use of chemicals and all of that you have to adhere to. So it's like a book of rules and regulations that you have to adhere to in order to export. Yeah. Then you have to get the right fruit type and spec and cultivar to supply those markets. And when you get back to the payments, the growers are always the exposed ones. It's not like an exporter or a retailer in the UK buys the fruit and takes it from you, from your farm or your pack house. Okay. You ship it to them, they sell it, and if there's any quality issues, all those claims comes back to you. So, and it takes you these days 16, 18 days per vessel or with shipping to get the fruit from Cape Town, say, to Europe. And there's a lot of risks involved in that, in getting the fruit in the correct quality to those markets. If there's anything wrong, the client, and then those claims will come back to you. So you find instances the growers actually have to pay in money to get the fruit destroyed on that side or sold at a lower price than production costs, although you've covered the shipping, the packing, the production, all of that.
Yeah. And where does HoodGrow come into this part? Because you mentioned that you don't necessarily trade the fruits, but it's more of legislation, documentation, liaising with government, stakeholders, etc. And in these cases, like, where does HoodGrow come in, and can you influence the decisions with the global markets by any chance?
Not at the commercial level. That's a discussion between the customer on that side and the producer and the exporter on this side. But on a higher level, we come in with a minimum specifications. So there's minimum export specifications for color, for size, for the pressure of the fruit, for the sugar content of the fruit. All of that. That's where we come in, but that's a minimum. You don't aim for the minimum. You aim for the higher spec so you can earn better money.
Established in '97, how big is your membership base right now? And we focus a lot on farmers. Are some nurseries are some nurseries and maybe some some marketers part of HoodGrow, because you want to obviously add some diversity into the members that you represent?
Yeah, we are grower focused. So all growers of stone and palm fruit are members of HoodGrow. We've got about 630 apple and pear growers and about 860 stone fruit growers. But because we are also integrated, although the grower is our focus and basically the guy who funds us, we look after them, but also work closely with the pack houses and also work closely with the exporters because it's an integrated chain that we operate in. So all of that we do in order for the grower to do the best as possible on the farm.
And also just to understand the structure of HoodGrow, Jacques, is, so for example, if I had to decide to invest in a pear farm tomorrow, do I have to be part of HoodGrow? Because, you know, when I heard you talk, it's that, yes, this is a very niche fruit or a niche commodity. And as a new farmer, do I have to be part of HoodGrow so that I don't flood the market with a lot of fruits? So yeah, can one just operate on their own, or is it very beneficial to be part of HoodGrow so that you guys can keep control of the amount of fruit that is produced in South Africa, and just to get stats like this so that we can compare where we stand with the global markets, and to also ensure that, you know, new farmers just don't flood the market with a specific fruit and maybe are buying the wrong varieties? How does it work?
Yeah, so we don't control at all. You can plant whatever you want to, as many as you want to. We don't control the plantings or the volumes at all. We supply information and we try and inform and educate people in the right way. But because it's a statutory measure that's in place, as I said, for the 4 years, if there's a majority yes vote, then it's gazetted by the Minister of Agriculture. And on every carton that's exported or sold, there's a X amount of cents per kilo that comes to us. So we've got boards on the palm fruit side and on the stone fruit side that's made up of growers. So they govern our functions and what we do with their money in essence. But not commercially involved, no controls. That was 97, pre-97.
Oh, okay. Because I thought maybe, you know, it would be beneficial to just keep control or keep informed of what new growers are doing on the ground, and also not to just flood the market. So that's quite interesting to hear.
What we try and do is we do a tree census every year. So we know which trees, which cultivars were planted in which areas. And then we've got a model that predicts how much plums will be produced in the next 5 years or 10 years. So we can guide the growers and tell them, look at the stats. Those are the facts. We foresee hypothetically an oversupply of plums in the next 3 years. So be careful of what you plant. Think about which markets you want to service, and just be aware of what's going on.
Yeah. And another reason why I was asking this is also maybe just to have control of the different maybe disease outbreaks that could happen, because this is a huge investment. So I'm sure you wouldn't want any just brand new farmer maybe getting seeds from who knows where, trees from who knows where, or, you know, unknown nurseries just setting up shop. And then all of a sudden there's an outbreak of some funny virus going around and, you know, damaging quite a lot of investments that farmers have put on the ground.
Yeah, 100% correct. I mean, it's as I said, a 25-year plus investment.
Yes.
And if you look at the amount of money that you invest over those 25 years, don't take shortcuts when it comes to buying trees. Buy the proper trees. Buy the right cultivar that's suited to your area. Otherwise, if you make that mistake in year one, and after 3, 4, 5 years, you find out, I made a mistake, you've lost those 4 years and you have to start over again. And you pretty much, we've done the calculation. I think it's over R1 million that you lose if you planted the incorrect cultivar or the wrong tree quality at the start, and you have to do it over again.
Wow. Jacques, this sounds so fascinating, and I wish I had like an hour of your time, because, you know, there's just so much technicalities and specific things that go into the trade and marketing of the different fruits that Hortgro represents. But just to sum up our conversation this evening, which has been so fantastic, I just want to find out what are some of the milestones that Hortgro has been able to achieve, maybe since its establishment, or maybe since you've been part of the organization. So what are some of the things that we could celebrate about, any information on growers, anything that Hortgro maybe has been able to break into the market, maybe, get on new, create new untapped territories that, some countries that never bought from us before, and now, you've been able to unlock those relationships. So maybe just tell us some of the success stories or milestones that Hortgro is most importantly proud of since maybe its inception or since you have been part of the organization.
I think in general, getting those two industries organized and structured and well equipped with information and excellent research infrastructure and networks that's been built up with the various universities locally as well as abroad, and the government, of course, and the ARC. In terms of market access, one of the big ones, but that's already 5-6 years ago, was getting access to China for apples. But that process took us 12 years. We applied in 2003 for all stone fruit and all palm fruit, the process to kick it off to get access. So apples was passed in 2015, and I really hope that we can get access for pears before the end of the year. But if you look globally, protectionism, and it was just exacerbated by COVID. Protectionism globally, countries looking after their own interests, after their own growers. So market access retention has become more difficult. Spain wants us out as long as possible with our stone fruit because we compete at the beginning or at the end of their season on their local market. And this is a global phenomenon. So retention of markets, gaining of new market access, and then optimizing the markets that we do have access to is basically the grow strategy that we are working with on the market access side.
Right. Thank you so much, Jacques, for your time this evening. It was very, very engaging and very, very informative. And I think I learned a few things, stone fruit, deciduous fruit, the trade thereof. And it's definitely created a lot more anxiety to me around exporting. I'm glad I'm a vegetable farmer because then I don't have to deal with so many years of uncertainty, even if you've had contracts in place, but anything could happen, Look at what COVID has taught us. Now you're saying that countries are trying to kick certain international markets out and focus on their own farmers. And I can just imagine when you have to relay that information back to the growers to say, maybe we can't go into Spain anymore because, they're deciding to subsidize and support their own farmers. So what do we do at that time? And especially once you've made so much investment, and being a farmer in South Africa, I know that farming doesn't come cheap these days. So yeah, it's been such an educational and informative conversation, and hope we could have you on the podcast once again.
It's a pleasure. Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Surround yourself with the right people and right advice, and then you can get to the export market.
Absolutely. I definitely agree to that. Thank you so much, Jacques. That was Jacques Du Preez, who's the General Manager of Trade and Markets at Hortgro, which is an association led by growers, deciduous and stone fruit growers. And he told us about, the structure, how his portfolio works, touched on a bit of the export markets, the trade, the various fruits that are traded in various countries. We spoke about the different specs, the varieties, and some of the technicalities and challenges around trading and exporting fruits. If you've missed this conversation this evening, you could catch us directly onto our YouTube channel, Private Property, under the Farming Podcast playlist, and you could hear everything that Jacques had to say. If you are a fruit farmer, please contact HoodGrow if you haven't been a member as yet. But if you are a fruit farmer looking to get more information, please reach out to Jacques, contact HoodGrow, and I'm sure they'll be able to give you sufficient information regarding the trees, the different varieties, what you should plant in your area. It sounds like a definite long-term investment with huge rewards. But thankfully, we have organizations like HoodGrow to assist the grower at the end of the day in a lot of the things that, are based outside the farm and has to do a lot on the trading, how you position yourself, who to market and how you market, etc. Thank you so much for joining the Farming Podcast this evening. Catch me once again on Thursday at 8 p.m. and I will see you then. Take care.